He woke up late again, not because he wanted to, but because the weight of another failure had made his bed feel like quicksand every morning. His phone buzzed with unread messages, unanswered calls, ignored responsibilities. And in the silence that followed, he sat with his head in his hands, wondering when exactly he stopped trying. The room smelled of old takeout. The mirror hadn't been cleaned in weeks, and the version of himself that stared back was someone he didn't remember choosing to become. He didn't hate his life, but he didn't love it either, and somehow that made it worse. There was no rock bottom, just a slow, quiet sinking, a drowning in comfort that disguised itself as peace. That morning, something shifted, not with lightning or noise, but with a whisper, a thought that simply said, "What if I tried again, just once?" Not a grand plan, not a life transformation, just a single promise to himself to do one thing different. So he stood up, drank a glass of cold water and did 10 push-ups, not because they would change his body, but because they might change his mind. He laughed under his breath when he finished. They weren't perfect, they weren't pretty, but they were done. For the first time in weeks, he had followed through on something, and the feeling was electric, not because of the push-ups, but because he had finally stopped breaking promises to himself. He took a shower, cooked something instead of ordering out, and opened a book that had gathered dust since he bought it. The day didn't become magical, the sun didn't shine any brighter, but something inside him had cracked open a little, like a beam of light slipping under a locked door. That night he went to sleep without scrolling through social media, without the voice in his head telling him he wasted another day, and in the quiet that followed, he whispered to himself, tomorrow again. The next morning came, and so did the resistance. But now he had something to fight for, the memory of how it felt to keep a promise. He did 15 push-ups this time and laughed again, but not because it was funny, because it was real, because it was working, because something inside him was waking up. He wrote in a notebook for 5 minutes, not about goals or dreams, just about how he felt. It was messy and raw, but it was his, and it mattered, because it proved that he was still in there, buried under the noise. As the days passed, he didn't do everything perfectly. He still had moments of doubt and days where he wanted to quit, but he didn't. He showed up. That became his new identity, not perfect, not extraordinary, just someone who shows up even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. It wasn't long before the mirror showed something new, not muscles or glow, but energy, a presence, a spark. He started craving that feeling, the one that came after effort, the high, that came not from comfort, but from consistency. He started chasing it, not for results, not yet, but for the power it gave him back. He didn't tell anyone what he was doing. He didn't post it online or announce it to the world, because this wasn't about anyone else. It was about reclaiming the man he lost when he started settling for less. Every small win was a declaration: I am not done, I am not broken, I am not weak, I am just getting started. And so the addiction began, not to fame, not to validation, but to the feeling of moving forward, of watching himself become someone worth respecting. He realized he didn't need to be motivated, he needed proof, and now he had it. The spark was real, the path was possible, and the man he wanted to be was already inside him, clawing his way out. All it took was a decision not to change the world, but to change a single moment, and then protect that moment like his life depended on it, because in many ways, it did. Days turned into patterns, and patterns turned into purpose. The 10 push-ups became 20, the journaling became longer, the food cleaner, the mornings earlier. He no longer had to force himself out of bed because he began waking before the alarm, hungry for the fight, not afraid of it. The mirror changed again, not just in reflection, but in presence. His eyes carried a new kind of light, sharp, focused, almost unfamiliar, like he had been searching for this version of himself in every failure, and finally found it. It wasn't about how he looked, but how he moved, how he breathed, how he responded to the silence. Routine became his religion, not out of obsession, but out of reverence. Wake early, move, sweat, reflect, work, repeat. Not perfect, not robotic, just deeply committed. The world outside didn't understand what was happening inside, and that was fine, because this wasn't a performance, it was a transformation. He started to notice the little wins, the shirt that fit better, the way his hands no longer trembled when he spoke in meetings, the way people started to say, "You've changed," with a tone of curiosity and quiet admiration. But the real shift wasn't what they saw, it was what he felt. Control, ownership, power. Not over others, but over himself. Every morning became a battlefield where he won by showing up, and every night became a quiet celebration of another promise kept. He didn't need motivation anymore because he had momentum, and momentum was sacred. He didn't wait to feel inspired. He became the kind of man who moved through resistance like wind, through trees, unshaken, steady, inevitable. The more he showed up, the more he craved the feeling of alignment. He stopped chasing dopamine and started chasing discipline. He stopped needing the noise of entertainment and started finding joy in the silence of growth. His phone stayed silent, his mind stayed loud, but now the voice in his head was his ally, not his enemy. He didn't just do things, he became things. He became the man who trains when no one is watching, who says no to excuses, who takes the stairs, who reads instead of scrolls, who asks more from himself because he knows what he's capable of. And every day that identity grew stronger. Every action a vote for the future he refused to let die. The world around him moved the same, but he had changed his relationship to it. Traffic didn't frustrate him anymore, it gave him time to reflect. Problems at work didn't break him anymore, they gave him a chance to lead. Delays, rejections, judgment. None of it mattered because he had something stronger than all of it. Vision, and the discipline to back it up. He started setting goals, not just to achieve them, but to become the kind of person who could. He trained, not to build a body, but to build a mind. He meditated not to find peace, but to sharpen clarity. He read not to sound smart, but to stay humble. Every habit was a thread in the tapestry of the man he was becoming. One morning, after a hard run in the rain-soaked clothes and burning lungs, he stopped in the middle of the road and laughed, not out of joy, but out of disbelief. This was the same man who once couldn't do 10 push-ups, the same man who used to sleep through alarms and dread the mirror. And now here he was, not chasing greatness, but living it 1 rep, 1 page, 1 hour at a time. He had become addicted not to success, but to the ritual of effort, to the sacred rhythm of becoming. And in that addiction he found something the old version of him had never touched: pride earned, not given; strength born, not bought; purpose created, not found. But addiction to growth has its own shadows, and soon he would face the test that every rising soul must meet when the world pulls you back and asks, "Are you still him?" when no one is clapping. It started small, like it always does. A missed alarm, a skipped journal, a voice whispering, "You've earned a break." He had been consistent. For months, pushing harder, rising earlier, eating cleaner, thinking deeper. And then came the invitation, an old friend's birthday, a night out. Just one. He went thinking he could control it, thinking the new him was stronger than the old cravings. The music hit his chest like a memory, the drinks poured, the laughter felt familiar, and somewhere between the second and third glass, he forgot the promises. He laughed too hard, talked too loud, stayed too late. He told himself it was fine, a celebration, a pause, not a fall. But when he woke up the next morning, his body knew the truth. His head throbbed, not from the alcohol, but from the guilt, the mirror. Reflected tired eyes. The journal page was blank, the routine broken. He sat on the edge of his bed, trying to make sense of it, how something so small could unravel so much. It wasn't the night that haunted him. It was the ease with which he slipped, the casual betrayal of the man he had worked so hard to become. He tried to recover the next day, but everything felt heavier. The push-ups slower, the mind louder, the discipline weaker. It terrified him how quickly momentum could vanish, how fast the beast of comfort returned. But this time, he wasn't the same man. He saw it. He named it and he fought it. The test wasn't in never slipping. The test was in what you do after the slip. And so he got up slower than before, but with more intention. He picked up the pen, his hand trembling, and wrote a single sentence. I do not break twice. The sentence wasn't poetic, but it was a vow. He cut the noise blocked. The calls turned down the next invitations. He realized addiction to progress required boundaries as much as ambition. The world didn't care about his journey. It just wanted him back in the crowd. But he was never built in for the crowd. He was building something rarer, something sacred. The next few days were harder than the early ones, not because of the body, but because of the mind. The doubt, the shame, the whispers that said, see, you were pretending all along. But he answered them not with words, but with action. Early rise, cold shower, 25 push-ups, a page in the journal, a chapter read, a meal cooked. He bled his way back into the man he had almost lost. He understood now that success wasn't a staircase, but a spiral. You climb, then slip, then climb again, each time with more knowledge, more resilience, more hunger. Failure wasn't the enemy, quitting was, and he wasn't a quitter, not anymore. He stopped chasing perfect days and started worshipping honest ones. Days where the discipline didn't come easy but still arrived. Days where he didn't feel strong but showed up anyway. Days where he didn't feel inspired but still built the bricks of his future. And slowly the rhythm returned. But this time it was different. It wasn't about addiction to results anymore. It was about loyalty to effort, love for the process, respect for the pain. He no longer needed results to stay addicted. He was addicted to the man he became through the struggle, but the world was not done testing him. Just as he found his footing again, life came for him in the way it always does, with silence first, then chaos. A family emergency, a financial loss, a deep betrayal from someone he trusted. The kind of blow that makes you question everything you built. And this time the voice didn't say, take a break. It said, run away. And for a brief second he considered it again. Escape, comfort, numbness. But deep inside him, something had changed, something irreversible. He whispered to himself the most powerful words he had ever spoken. I don't get to quit on the man I prayed to become. The storm hit harder than he expected, and this time there was no time to prepare, no moment to brace, just impact. The emergency came in the form of a hospital call, a voice trembling on the other end, words that shattered the calm. His younger brother, a car crash, critical condition. He dropped everything and ran, heart pounding, mind blank, as if the entire world had collapsed. Inward, hospitals have a strange way of erasing strength. They reduce everyone to silence and prayer. He sat in the sterile waiting room, his hands clenched, staring at a crack in the wall, as if answers lived there. All the progress, the routines, the rituals felt distant, unreal, like someone else's story. What did push-ups mean now? What did mourning? Routines matter when the people you loved were fragile and mortal and slipping. For hours, he waited, reliving childhood memories of scraped knees, shared secrets, midnight talks, and laughter that once filled their small home. He remembered how he promised his brother he'd change, become someone better, not just for himself, but for both of them. And now he wondered if he'd get the chance to say it again, to say, I kept the promise. When the doctor finally emerged, his face was unreadable, but the words were not. Stable, surgery successful, long road ahead, but he made it. Relief came not as joy, but as collapse. He didn't cry, he just sat back in the chair and let the weight of every moment crash into him. Life didn't care about your progress. Life gave and took on its own terms. He stayed at the hospital for nights, barely sleeping, feeding his brother, helping the nurses, being present. The habits fell away. No journaling, no workouts, just service. And strangely, it didn't feel like failure. It felt like evolution. The man who once needed control now learned surrender. Not all discipline is about doing. Some of it is about staying. And when his brother finally opened his eyes and whispered, "You kept going, didn't you?" something broke inside him and something stronger formed in its place. Because in that moment, he realized the point was never the mirror or the muscles or the milestones. The point was to become the kind of man who can be strong for others when they cannot. The breaking point did not break him. It revealed him, and in that reveal, he found a deeper addiction, not to results, not to applause, but to purpose. To wake up and choose effort even when no one sees it. To keep promises that no one remembers but him. To become a shelter in storms. Not because life is easy, but because someone must be steady. He returned home weeks later different, not ruined, but refined. The rituals returned, but they were quieter now, humbler. The workouts were slower, the pages written with more care, the mornings. Not rushed, but sacred. He no longer chased intensity, he chased meaning. He no longer wanted to impress, he wanted to impact. And slowly, without fanfare, the results returned. The body stronger, the mind quieter, the purpose louder. But he didn't chase them anymore. They followed him now, like shadows follow light. Not because he was addicted to winning, but because he had learned the truth that the result is not the destination. The result is the reflection of who you become when you refuse to give up. He stood one morning on his rooftop, watching the city breathe below the sun, just breaking the edge of sky, and whispered the words that had become his compass. "I am the result of every decision I refused to let die." And somewhere deep inside he knew he had become the man he once needed, and he wasn't done yet. He never went back to who he was not fully, not ever. Because once you've seen your own transformation, you cannot unsee it. You can't unknow the weight you've lifted, or the demons you've faced, or the lies you stopped telling yourself. He didn't walk differently, he didn't speak louder. He just carried a certain stillness now, a certain weight that only comes from having burned everything inside you and rebuilt it with your own bare hands. The world began to notice. Not in applause, but in quiet questions. Friends who once laughed at his journey now asked how he did it. Strangers messaged him, drawn not to his muscles or routines, but to the light behind his eyes, the silence in his stride, the proof that something more was possible. And he told them the truth. It starts in the dark. Always. It starts when you are alone and broken and tired of your own excuses. It starts when you stop waiting for permission and decide that enough is enough. But he also warned them. The results will come, but not to reward you, they come to test you. To see if you will keep showing up once the applause fades. To see if you can love the process more than the outcome. Because results are not a finish line. They are the beginning of the addiction, and the only way to stay clean is to fall in. Love with the effort itself. He kept climbing, not to prove anyone wrong anymore, not to prove himself right, but because the climb itself had become his temple, his truth. The grind was no longer punishment, it was poetry. The silence, no longer lonely, it was holy. He wasn't chasing goals, he was chasing who he could become in pursuit of them. And every single day he discovered there was more strength, more peace, more clarity, more him. He thought about the man he used to be, and he no longer hated him. He forgave him, because that man with all his failures and doubts and mistakes was the reason he ever began. The addiction to results had once been his drug, but now it had become his discipline. Not to escape himself, but to return home to the truest version of who he was meant to be. One morning he walked past a mirror and didn't stop to flex or assess. He just nodded, not in pride, but in understanding. That the mirror didn't matter, anymore. Because the real transformation lived in the decisions behind his eyes, the scars beneath his skin, the choices made when no one was watching. And if you asked him how he did it, he'd say this: start now, start broken, start afraid, but start. Chase consistency, not motivation. Worship discipline, not dopamine. And remember, the results will come. And when they do, don't stop. Because once you start seeing results, you will become addicted, not to winning, but to rising. You will become addicted to the man or woman you're becoming. The one who wakes up early, the one who doesn't break their own word, the one who builds silently and lets the life they live speak for them, the one who can hold the storm and still move forward. So start. And if you've already started, keep going, because the climb never ends. And that's the point. That's the gift. The next video is waiting for you, and it just might be the spark you need to fuel the next part of your journey. Click. Now don't wait. Your future self is watching, and he's hoping you won't quit this time. Because once you start seeing results, you become addicted. And maybe that's not a warning. Maybe that's the way out.